All right, good morning, everyone. How are you all doing today? Hope you all got a chance to watch the lecture on YouTube at some point. If not, hope you get a chance to some point soon. So just to remind everyone, this is a hybrid course. Hopefully you're here on the correct day. If not, no big deal. Just make sure that you keep up on the lectures. There will certainly be material covered on the exams that is only covered in the lectures, may not be inside the textbook. So you definitely want to make sure you're paying attention. Just kind of recap, I got some questions, over email last class over several different things. The textbook is separate from the system. So the textbook actually uses a system called Wiley Plus. We're not going to use Wiley Plus. Instead, I managed to secure us some access to the Connect Master from McGraw-Hill, so that's available free of charge. Make sure that you're able to get into that. The first assignments inside of Connect Master are due at this coming Tuesday, so a couple days at 11:59 p.m. I think there's about 4 different assignments. I'll go ahead and just briefly show you, just kind of recap. Some of you probably already looked through this and done it, but just in case you haven't, here's where they're at. So this is the course inside of Connect Master. You'll have all the different Connect Master assignments. You have to pay attention to due dates, unfortunately. I can't really arrange them or sort them by due date. Be a nice feature, but Canvas doesn't seem to allow it. It only sorts them alphabetically for some reason. So you have an adaptive learning assignment due on January 19th. You have a case study due on January 19th and a quiz. Make sure that you look through them carefully and do every assignment that is due. Because if you don't, I don't accept late work, so make sure you do them. And that's not to be confused with the chapter quizzes. The chapter quizzes are available inside of each unit. So anyone having any issues seeing anything inside of Canvas, accessing it, anything like that, we need to address right now. Well, feel free to see me after class if you're having any issues with anything inside of here. Like I said, I'm pretty sure that everything should be published and available, but I usually manage to mess it up in Canvas, so let me know if there's any mistakes. Certainly happy to address anything. With that said, any questions before we jump into the content today? Well, I'm always happy to address questions, so with that out of the way, let's go ahead and talk about Chapter 1, Introduction to Information Systems. So based off the title of the chapter, you can probably form some pretty good guess as to what we're covering today. And that is, of course, describing what an information system is, how they're used, why they're used, what are the benefits of their use, what are the drawbacks of their use, how do they affect companies, how do they affect society as a whole, how do they affect individuals, how do they affect groups. All these are some topics we'll be covering today, and just kind of doing a very basic overview of the concept of information systems, how they're used, and all that. So I've got a quick little survey here. It's optional, but it'll give us something to kind of go through and have some good audience participation inside of a lecture class. So if you'd like to do this, it's up here. I'll give you all a couple minutes to navigate to it. While everyone's navigating to it, what did y'all think of the audio quality? Was it good enough? Y'all could hear the lecture okay when you watch the video? That's good. I have a different mic that's a little bit closer to my face, but I think it makes me look like a nerd, so I'll wear it if I have to, but I'd rather look cool, so. All right, is anyone still navigating to it? It's fine if you're still filling it out, but if no one's still navigating to it, I'm going to go ahead and go to the next slide. So the way that I kind of view a course is not about memorization. Last class I mentioned the exams are open book and open note, open internet. The only thing they're not open is classmates, so you can't ask each other answers on that. But beyond that, pretty much anything goes. So I'm not really big on definitions. And you may say, well, why are your chapter quizzes all definitions? Well, I made those a long time ago to save people money on having to buy the access codes, but managed to score a free deal this time for everyone, so I thought I'll give it a shot. But that's neither here nor there. I'm not really big on definitions, but it is important to understand one of the most basic and certainly the most central concept of this class is an information system. So with that out of the way, I'll go ahead and read off this definition. An information system collects, processes, stores, analyzes, and disseminates information for specific purposes. And that sounds kind of complicated, but when you really break it down, you see an information system is just something that gets data inside of it, does some sort of processing to it, and then gives you some data back. So this could be something like a transaction processing system where we have a transaction. You go to a store, you make a purchase. The purchase is recorded. However you paid for it is recorded. If you paid with credit card, that information is recorded. If you paid with cash, that information is recorded as well. Whatever your method of payment is, whatever the amount of the purchase was, whatever the sales tax was, all that is stored, then it's going to have some processing done to it. If we're talking about a transaction processing system in particular, it's going to then bill your card. And once all that is done, you of course have the data. What are our total monthly sales? What are our annual sales? What did we sell on this specific date? What did we sell to this customer? All that's very important information. And we're going to talk about that more, but I just want to give you an example beyond the definition of an information system. So when we're talking about information systems, one of the most well-known and certainly one of the most prolific information systems is the Enterprise Resource Planning System. This is a system that has been in use since around the 80s, and certainly as it's been used, it's expanded and we have additional types of enterprise resource planning systems. But these are the 6 main components that we see here. So the first one is going to be the finance and accounting component of an ERP. And that's exactly what you would anticipate having. It has the spending data, has the revenue data. All the financial variables are going to be included inside of the ERP. So one of the big advantages is that if you were inside of, let's say, the human resources department, and you need to know how much revenue do we have for our company at this given time? Can we afford to hire additional employees? Should we look to reduce our current workforce? What should we do with that? Well, we can easily see because it's all inside of a singular system that we can access, and we can certainly gain lots of good insight. So human resources, I just kind of said it, has employment information. Who works for our company? What do they do? How long have they been here? What are they making? What sort of benefits do they have? We have to record all this information, and it's very commonly recorded inside of an ERP because it allows all the different departments and functional units within inside of an organization to access and to gain the information. We have manufacturing. It's kind of an old school term. Originally when we had the ERP, it was developed for manufacturing firms to reduce waste and to reduce any sort of lag times, anything like that. But generally think of this as a primary business activity. And we're going to talk more about this when we talk about the Porter value chain. But in general, the primary business activity of a firm is what the firm does. So if we have a firm like Pizza Hut, what do? They make and sell pizzas. So that's what the manufacturing element would be. It is their primary business activity. Could be manufacturing, but it doesn't have to be manufacturing. So that's certainly one of the major components. Then we have supply chain management. So we have a supply chain. We have goods coming in and out. Of course, we have raw materials. We do some sort of transformation to them, and that is going to be our product. So having an idea of what we currently have in our inventory, what we have in work in progress, what we have in finished goods, how we can best and most efficiently ship and receive, that's all going to be the idea of supply chain management. Of course, we have project management. The difference between a project and a process is very important. So we have a process. It's an ongoing task with no end. Payroll, Do you ever quit doing payroll? Hopefully not. I don't think your employees would be too happy if you quit doing the payroll process. But imagine if you were to build a new payroll management system. That would be a project. You have a task, you have a start date, you have some sort of requirements for it, and you have an end date. So when we think about that, a project is simply something with a start date and an end date, some specific goal that we want to accomplish. It could be making a new system. It could be building a new building. It could be acquiring some new piece of equipment. Whatever the case may be, we have a dedicated functional unit inside of an organization for project management. And then lastly, customer relationship management. It's all about who our customers are. So we're probably going to have a sales team of some sort. This could be cashiers. This could be actual sales personnel. Depends on what our firm needs. But the idea is we keep track of our customers. We know who is buying our goods. We know how much of our goods they're buying. We know when they purchase our goods. Now, there's a lot of reasons that could be very beneficial information. First of all, with things like Sarbanes-Oxley, we have to have the information anyway, especially for a publicly traded firm. But, thinking beyond why do we have to have it, why should we want to have it? I think that's a more interesting question to ask. So if we know who is buying our product or service, what can we do with that information? We could better target ads to the specific buyer. Imagine we are let's say we're a nursing home. Do we want to advertise on a platform like TikTok, or do we want to advertise on something like, what's that late night buying show? Whatever it is, the infomercial channel, you know what I'm talking about. Which one should we advertise on? The infomercials. That's what our target demographic will more likely be watching. Certainly more likely than I would say TikTok. So some of the things to think about. How can we best reach our customers? Information systems can help us with that. Let's talk about some other types of information systems. So we talked about the general enterprise resource planning system. It's not the only one. In fact, there's far more than this. But this is just kind of a general example. So the first example I have here, decision support systems. So what we have with a decision support system is we have some sort of system. It never makes the decision for us. It instead provides us with some sort of evidence and kind of giving maybe suggestions, but it does not actually make a decision for us. So imagine we're a bank, and banks often give and receive loans. So, you may go into a bank and you may want to apply for a mortgage. And when you're doing that, they're going to ask you some information to determine how likely you are to pay the loan back. They may ask you, what is your income? What other loans do you have right now? What do you want to do with the loan? Stuff like that. And depending on your answers to those questions, they're probably going to record all that, and they're probably going to get some idea of how likely you are to pay it back. We can use a decision support system to help that process along to make it go more smoothly and efficiently, and hopefully have better results. Now, we're talking about better results in the context that could mean many different things. Maybe you want to have a larger customer base. Maybe you want to give more loans. Well, how can we do that? Well, we could reach out to more customers. That's certainly one way. We could also be a little bit less stringent in our selection process. Would that be beneficial? Perhaps it could be disastrous. But regardless of that, that's the whole idea of a decision support system. Transaction processing system we've already kind of talked about. We have a transaction taking place. We're recording the information about it. We're making sure that we receive the money, making sure that we're able to use it however we see fit. If we didn't do that, we may miss out on some transactions. What I mean by that is we could have the transaction take place, and if we don't actually have a system to keep track of it, it can be very easy to miss a payment, to have someone not ever pay us for something, and that would be problematic. We don't want that. Executive support system. Simply going to be a system that's put in place to serve the needs of a specific executive. So, imagine you're an executive at a large multinational firm. Let's use a bank, for example. Imagine you're the CEO of Goldman Sachs. What sort of information would you want to have? Would you want to have information about how much money your firm currently has? What is the cash of your current firm? That'd be pretty beneficial to have that at your fingertips. There's probably lots of other things you would need. You put all that information inside of an executive support system so you can quickly and easily see what information is relevant to an executive. Now, it's kind of contrast a little bit with an expert system. An expert system is simply a system where we have something that's tailored to a specific profession. So it's going to have lots of recorded information about one profession. This is quite common inside the information technology sector. You have an expert system, you have articles written specifically for whatever piece of technology you're needing to support. So imagine you had a specific model of laptop. It may have articles in there for doing common repairs. Things like replacing a hard drive, replacing a screen, doing upgrades. All that would be recorded inside of an expert system. Now, a knowledge management system, a little bit more general. It's not so focused on one specific profession. Instead, it's focused more on maintaining organizational knowledge. And we have an entire chapter on this, so don't be too concerned with it at this exact moment. But when we think about what a knowledge management system is, it really is a system that records all of our organizational knowledge. Probably not all in practice, but certainly when we have explicit knowledge, things that we can know, a fact, some specific number, we can certainly include it within inside of our knowledge management system. And then lastly, we have financial market systems. So a financial market system is simply going to be a system that allows for maybe trading of equities, funds, stuff like that. Could give us historical information, could give us projections, really anything like that. A great example of a financial market system is right down the hallway on the first floor. I think it's across from the E-Center. We have the Strategic Finance Lab. We have about 10 Bloomberg terminals in there. Those are great examples. I highly recommend you use them if you get a chance before you graduate. They have tons of good information in them, and it's going to be readily updated, basically real time. As far as financial market systems go, that's probably the most frequently updated system. So tons of things you can do in them. You can do things like discuss rumors. You can do things like look at historical performance. You can look at what projections are saying. You can look at the current news for firm. Everything you can imagine, you can do very quickly. So let's talk a little bit about information technology. So at the basic, stage of what is information technology, well, it's technology. So when we define technology, we have several different components. We have the hardware, the physical. So my laptop up here, that's a physical piece of hardware. And then on my laptop, I'm running software. Of course, I'm running PowerPoint. I'm running some streaming software as well. And certainly, that is going to be the software. What is the hardware doing? It's basically software. And we have databases. So I'm not going to talk too much about databases right now, but the whole concept of a database is you're storing data long term. And this could be data for anything. It could be data about your customers. It could be data about your transactions, anything like that. And then one of the most important innovations, of course, is networking. Now, that's allowing systems to communicate, allowing different devices to communicate with each other. If we couldn't do that, how useful would it be? It'd still be useful, but imagine if you couldn't just email someone a file. How would you get the file to them? Maybe on a flash drive, maybe if you're going even older than that, maybe on a floppy drive. Certainly we have lots of different ways we could, but what's the problem with that? You have to have some sort of physical exchange. So if you're going to mail someone something, that can take quite a bit of time. Certainly the mail, not always known for being the fastest thing. Now, of course, you could say, well, what if we overnight it? What's the problem with overnighting something? It's not the cheapest thing. So if we're going to do that, it's going to be very costly. Networks, over time, allow us to save tremendous amounts of money. Now, when we contrast IT to IS, these are terms that are often used interchangeably, but they're not the same thing. So an IT, technology, but an information system includes two additional components, people. The people actually using it are included within the definition of an information system. This includes maybe your employees. This could include your customers, anyone who's using the system. Pretty straightforward there. And then most importantly, processes. So processes are a very important thing to include because it's saying, what are we actually doing? It's one thing to collect the information. What are we going to do with it? So that's where the processes come into place. It determines, as a high-level organization, how do we actually use the information we've collected? Does it do any good to collect information? Inherently, it does not do any good. It's not necessarily beneficial until you use the information you've collected. That's where the IS differs from IT. Any questions so far? Certainly feel free to ask any questions. But let's kind of take a quick look at this graphic here. So in the center, we have our organization. And basically what we're showing is we're having an intra-organizational information system. In other words, we have our customers. It's going to be internal to our system. But then we also have our suppliers. They're external to our system. Yet we're all using the same information system. So it's very beneficial in doing things like reducing the transactional cost of whatever business we're in. So imagine if we did not have this. Let's say we want to place an order. Let's say we are Wendy's. What does Wendy's need to order? Hamburgers. Probably definitely need some hamburger meat. Buns. You definitely need to put the hamburger meat on something. Condiments, ketchup, mustard, mayonnaise. Lots of different things they need to order. Would it be easier to be able to just sign into your system and order whatever you need, or would it be easier to call someone and order every time you needed something? It's almost always going to be easier to order whatever you need. Now let me ask it a different way. Imagine if we got below a certain threshold and we automatically had it ordered. That'd be even easier. So certainly this can, over time, reduce the transactional cost and make it more efficient to get the same good. So it's certainly going to reduce the cost. And when we think about this, what's that doing? Is that making us more profitable? Or is that making our product cost that we're serving to customers lower? Or is it doing both? We don't have enough information to answer that. But what it is going to do is it's going to reduce the cost of goods sold. So we have the cost of goods sold, and then with that reduction, we can choose to do whatever we want with the money. We could certainly put it in our pocket, use that as profit. We could give it to shareholders, increase our dividends. We could reduce the price that customers pay, making us more of a cost leadership firm. We have lots of different options, but the whole concept is we don't necessarily inherently know until we've actually done it. And it's just going to reduce the cost of goods sold. That's all we can necessarily determine from that. Let's talk about what technology does for us. Accessibility. It's a very beneficial thing. It can certainly make it more affordable to provide accessible options. So for example, imagine someone is blind. It's certainly a lot more affordable to have a text-to-speech option, basically that just reads off the content, than it would be to have someone paid to read off the content to every blind person. So things like that. Now imagine someone was deaf. Having the ability to automatically use closed captioning would be a lot more affordable than paying someone to manually do it. So, it's going to be very beneficial from that perspective to have the accessibility very affordably done. So, previously it may be difficult for a smaller firm to be accessible to their customers, but with technology, they can certainly find more affordable ways to provide great service. Understanding, knowing what our firm is doing. One of the most important things a firm can know, revenue. Where is it coming from? When is it coming? The seasonality. Do people buy our goods at the same rate all year? Or do we have certain seasons that our goods are purchased at more level than others? All this is important information, and we can easily determine it if we have the data to do so. Health and safety. Certainly we think about automobiles. Have they gotten safer over the past 50 years, or have they gotten less safe? Certainly hope they've gotten safer. And, a good amount of how they do that is through using technology. You think about the crash dummies. Think of how many different data points are inside of a modern crash dummy. Hundreds of thousands in a lot of cases. That's not possible to analyze without using technology. For that matter, it's not possible to develop the crash dummy without technology, but that's another story. We can certainly see at a much broader level how our product affects the people that are using it. And that's very beneficial for us. We have security. Now, this could be a hotly contested topic, but, in terms of physical security, we can certainly benefit from technology. So, use an example. Let's say you have a firm of 2,000 employees, and let's say you fire one employee. Okay, imagine if you had 2,000 people with a physical key. You're going to have to give them all a new key if you fire someone. Is that feasible to do? It's feasible. Is it fun? It's not going to be fun, and it's also not going to be very inexpensive. You're talking about probably spending 15 minutes on each of the employees to get them in, give them the new key, probably have a little bit of small talk in there. So 15 minutes times 2,000 employees. That's pretty big, is it not? Now, imagine if instead of doing that, you just simply say, we have card access to our building. You just revoke their card, the terminated employee's card, and then do you need to do anything with the 1,999 employees who are still there? You do not. So that's going to be much more affordable, and overall, most companies probably wouldn't bother to give 2,000 employees a new key. Then we also talk about the whole argument of cost and standard of living. So with technology, kind of going through how it can make the production of goods more affordable. We'll talk more about this in subsequent classes, but the whole idea is that we can increase the supply. So I'm going to go ahead and try to pull up a little document here. So let's just briefly go through what this means. So I'm going to draw out the supply and demand graphic here. Let's use our good friend maroon for the supply. Okay, so this is our demand curve. We have, of course, a downward-facing demand curve, and we have a supply curve. It's going to be upward-facing, of course. So, this is without technology. It's going to keep it nice and simple. But what happens if we make our processes more efficient? Well, we increase the supply. So we have a new supply curve. And when we do that, what happens to the price? Well, it's pretty simple what happens to the price. So this is our current price right here at the equilibrium, P1. And now we have a new price over here, thanks to our new supply curve we just created with the introduction of technology. So it reduces the price. And we have the quantity down here. And of course we see this is our original quantity, Q1. And we introduce the technology. We're able to have more people have access to the product. So that's going to be very beneficial. This is the type of thing. Truly disruptive technologies can greatly enhance the distribution of an innovation. So we think about the automobile. Imagine if automobiles were made, one person makes the entire automobile. What's the problem with that? Well, there's several, but probably the biggest problem is that's a very costly way to do things. An assembly line is a great innovation, and it allows more people to have access to the same product. It also allows the product to be contain fewer errors on average, but it's another story. So technology also affects each discipline. Accounting. How does it affect the accounting discipline? Well, at the most basic level, it makes it a lot easier. I'm sure that there's some accountants who may disagree there, but by and large, it's quite a bit easier to do things like adding up all of a revenue than it would be to do it on pen and paper. So what I mean by that is you have a database of all the revenues versus you have a notebook of all the revenues. It's also going to have fewer mistakes. That's going to be very beneficial, especially when we're thinking about how do we report the information. We have to report it. So that's going to be very beneficial. Marketing, like I said earlier, targeting your customers more effectively. If you can have an idea of who's buying your product, you can have an idea of how to better reach them. So, there's lots of different ways to do that. We'll talk about that more inside the customer relationship management chapter. But for now, just understand that it's very beneficial to have that ability to see who is buying our product, not who's buying our customer. Who's buying our product? When are they buying our product? What product are they buying? What are their behaviors? Finance and econ. Having access to things like Bloomberg Terminal can be very beneficial. Imagine you are in, say, March of 2020. Would it be a good time or a bad time to expand operations globally? Probably a pretty bad time. Now imagine you are in a different time. You'd have access to historical data, and you'd be able to see what is likely to happen in the future. So that's certainly going to be very beneficial. Management HR, again, we've talked about it. Making employment decisions. Do we hire new people? Is our demand increasing? Or is our demand decreasing? Do we need to do some layoffs? Do we need to do some terminations? Do we have performance issues? All these are things we can easily address with information systems. And of course, lastly, we have production. What are we actually making? Now, it doesn't have to be manufacturing. It could be a service. Imagine we're a doctor's office. We still have a product that we're selling to our customers, medical care. So whatever a product or service is, that's going to be the production. So take a quick look here at the market caps of firms. This is for the year 2020. So you can see that the top 10 firms ranked by market cap, do you see any sort of trends on there? Is there one industry that's kind of dominant on this list? So the fourth quarter of 2020, Apple, market cap of 2.2 trillion. Microsoft, 1.7 trillion. Amazon, 1.6 trillion. Alphabet, that includes Google's parent company. That's 1.2 trillion. Facebook, 700 billion. Tencent, Alibaba, TSMC. You could make an argument that between 4 and 8 of those 10 companies are tech firms. Why is tech valuable? Well, there's lots of reasons, but especially for 2020, it allowed people to communicate without having to be physically near each other. It allowed people to, in the case of Amazon and Tencent and Alibaba, it allowed people to receive products without physically visiting a store. Now, I'm not making an argument that's good or bad, but it's certainly the market likes it. So that's what we're seeing. And these trends, they may continue, they may not. We see Visa actually dropped off. And of course, we had TSMC, Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company. They joined the list. They received some pretty substantial contracts from Apple recently for the development of Apple Silicon on the 3-nanometer lithography. It's pretty big. We see they've certainly risen up recently. Any questions so far? Okay, so here's another interesting topic to consider. Is IT leading to job loss? So this is an article I found, I believe it's from Wall Street Journal in 1964, but I'm not positive on that. I pulled it several years back, so it's somewhere around that time period. It's certainly a very old newspaper article. And they say, they're making an argument that technology and sort of having the manufacturing be centralized is leading to job loss. And we think back, was there substantial job loss in the 60s? There was some temporary job loss, certainly, but overall, labor force participation rate actually increased pretty substantially. We see certainly additional people entering the workforce in the 60s. And we think back to present time, we see very similar reports now. This is from, I believe, the New York Times as well. I believe this is from 2016. So the article title is, "The Long-Term Jobs Killer is Not China, It's Automation." So we think about that. The article makes an argument that automation is leading to job loss. But that's not necessarily true. It's not necessarily not true either. I'm not here to state an opinion. But when you consider both sides of the argument, you could actually make an argument that it's going to lead to reshoring of certain manufacturing jobs. Because if you're not paying many employees, why would you ship something overseas? Of course, one possible explanation could be things like United Nations Universal Postal Union, in which it could be more favorable to have shipping from certain places than it would be the reverse. Again, that's a discussion for another day, but certainly having automation, it could make it more affordable actually to manufacture in countries that traditionally would be excluded from manufacturing due to labor cost differences. It's a very interesting labor cost economics problem. Will automation lead to job loss? Again, I'm not here to give an answer for that. But what I will do is show you the unemployment rate. So going back from about 20 years, we have July 1998, pretty low unemployment. Then, around 2000, we had the dot-com bust, had a little bit of additional unemployment. Certainly several firms closed during that time, and unfortunately people lost their jobs. So then, after that, of course, we had a very tragic event as well, around 2001. So Over time, though, the unemployment rate did decrease. And then, of course, we hit around 2008, had another unfortunate event there, the mortgage crisis, of course. And we had a unemployment rate double digits. And that's really high. But then we've actually seen that it's decreased again. So if you go back to 2008, 2009, there were people making an argument those jobs would never recover. Now, were they correct or were they incorrect? Well, you can't tell the entire story by just an unemployment rate. So when you add in the labor force participation rate, you can see that it did actually decrease during that time of job loss, and it never came back to its level that it previously was. Same thing is true of the 2008 recession. You certainly see that it decreased, and unlike the unemployment rate, which decreased, never came back. So you can certainly make an argument either way that it is decreasing or it is not decreasing. However, it's important to make note, the scale of these is different. So, overall, we're going from basically 67% labor force participation rate to 63%. So it's only a reduction of 4%. But that is a pretty substantial reduction when compared to the quite substantial unemployment rate right there. Okay. Now, it's always kind of cliche to talk about salaries on the first class day, which I guess this isn't technically the first day of class, but it's the first day of teaching a chapter. So certainly, you can look at all these different things. Depending on which job you have, you may have a different salary. So here we have some of the higher end salaries: engineer, consultant, data analyst. They're all going to command a pretty large salary. Now, this is going to be heavily dependent on the geographic area. An area like Mississippi, you may not see the higher end of this, especially not early career. However, there's lots of great places around. Memphis, for example, certainly the Huntsville, Birmingham area. We're not too far from Texas. We have Dallas, Fort Worth, certainly great places to start a career. Let's see, we have Houston, of course, Austin, Texas as well, Atlanta, Georgia. Lots of great places around, but Mississippi's pretty great too. I'm not trying to knock Mississippi or anything. But certainly these are just some average sort of salaries. Now when we look at more specifically IT salaries, we can certainly see some very different numbers. Now I pulled these from CIO.com, and it is going to be, again, dependent upon which area you're in. So if you're a data analyst in Mississippi, you're probably not going to be seeing $124,000 right out of college. That would not be very likely. Of course, we have some different data roles on here, lots of database analysts for various platforms. But again, it'd be very beneficial to be within the technology sector. Of course, we have some additional sort of business intelligence roles here. They're going to pay pretty well. But you also have to consider, what's the educational requirement? Most of these jobs up here right now, at minimum, they usually require a master's degree. So it could be something where you're not able to get into it right out of undergrad, and that could be a problem. And of course, we have some kind of more traditional technology roles, some things like desktop support, things like help desk support, various things like that. Pay a little bit lower, of course, but maybe the work is something you prefer. Whatever the case may be, that's pretty much just what I wanted to cover on the salaries. Okay, let's take a quick look at the results for the survey. And I get this over here. So we got some responses. And how would you rate your knowledge and understanding of information systems? Out of 73 people, no one would give themselves a 5-star. Hopefully by the end of the semester, we'll have at least 73 people rate themselves 5-star. But certainly we have a nice little distribution here. It's totally optional to do these, of course. What people do give themselves a 5-star on, though, is enjoying using technology. So, like I said last class, you can use whatever you want in here as long as it's not distracting. If you're going to listen to something, please don't listen to it using your speakers, of course. I'd prefer you not use headphones, but headphones don't really bother me all that much. So, no one really hates technology in here. That's kind of interesting. Looks like we're kind of split on whether or not technology will eliminate jobs. Looks like the plurality here is going to be maybe, second place being yes, and then third place being no. So again, that's an answer, or that's a question that I'm not necessarily here to answer. But there are certainly going to be multiple sides of the argument. And You know, the textbook, I think the 8th edition kind of addressed this, but the 7th edition and before, they kind of presented in a one-sided fashion where the authors made a case that it will eliminate jobs. And I just don't think that truly does the question justice, you know, to see if it will or will not. Certainly it will eliminate some jobs, but will it create others? And overall, what will the impact look like 50 years in the future? Who knows? So certainly is something to consider there. Okay, so just kind of wrap things up. We talked about what information systems are, how they're used, why they're used, what they can do for our organizations. And then, of course, we also look towards the future and saw what could we do in the future with technology. So any questions about today?